Billionaire encounters a disabled mom and her babies in the rain. The shocking truth that change. Rain poured down like a relentless waterfall, drenching everything in its path. On a dark street, illuminated only by the flickering lights overhead, a figure emerged from the chaos. A billionaire, known for his ruthless business moves, stood there, completely unfazed. But his icy exterior melted when he spotted her, a disabled mother, crouching beneath a tattered umbrella, desperately cradling two tiny babies. The sight cut through the cold night like a hot knife through butter. The air thickened with tension. He took a step closer, drawn in by a force he couldn't understand. What was this woman doing out here, exposed to the elements, with nothing but a ragged blanket to shield her children? Her eyes, filled with desperation, met his. They were like frozen lakes, hauntingly beautiful yet filled with stories unsaid. The sound of her baby's whimpers mixed with raindrops drumming against concrete, creating a haunting melody that tugged at his heartstrings. How could someone so fragile exist in such a harsh world? He felt his chest tighten, a lump rising in his throat. A wave of guilt washed over him. Was life really that unfair? It was a call for help, a silent scream echoing in his mind. Suddenly, a chill raced through him like lightning striking in a clear sky. In that very moment, he caught a glimpse of shadows lurking around the corner. Eyes, cold and calculating, watched him from the darkness. Was it coincidence? Or was someone planning something sinister? His heart pounded, bringing urgency to his every move. This wouldn't be just another charitable act. Something dangerous was brewing. Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As he stood there, the tension thick enough to cut, his instincts screamed at him to act. He moved forward, offering the woman a hand, wondering what she would do next. Would she accept his help, or would she recoil from his outstretched palm? The darkness deepened and shadows danced closer, raising the stakes. What was her secret? Why was she here? The mystery wrapped around them like the night itself. One thing was clear: life was about to change in ways they couldn't even imagine. The woman hesitated, her gaze darting between the billionaire's outstretched hand and the shadows creeping ever closer. For a brief instant, time stood still. The rain continued its assault, blurring the line between past and present, decision and consequence. Her heart pounded like a bass drum, louder than the roars of the wind. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. Was it directed at him? At the world? She leaned slightly toward his hand, her breath escaping in shallow gasps as if each inhalation weighed a ton. The babies, sensing their mother's fear, whimpered softly, their small bodies trembling. Just as he was about to close the gap, an errant flash of lightning illuminated the alley. He caught a glimpse of the figures lurking in the shadows. There were more than he initially thought. Their eyes glinted like shards of glass, hungry and calculating. For a split second, he tried to recognize the threat, but just as quickly, the darkness swallowed them whole again. "Get away from her!" The words burst out of him like a shot. Instinctively, his arm shot forward, now not just a gesture of kindness, but a protective barrier between her and the unknown menace. But it was too late. The shadows surged forward, revealing masked figures that seemed to materialize from the very night itself. The woman gasped, clutching her babies closer, panic washing over her eyes. Her instinct kicked in as she recoiled, but the billionaire grasped her wrist, firm yet gentle, his grip offering reassurance amidst the chaos. "Trust me," he urged, desperately searching her frightened face for a flicker of belief. There was no time to waste. He could feel the danger like a weight pressing down on his chest, suffocating him. Just then, one of the masked figures stepped into the pale glow of a nearby streetlight, revealing a menacing grin. "Look what we have here," the figure hissed, the voice dripping with malice. A pathetic mom and her luckier than you billionaire. Every second felt like a heartbeat, quickening the stakes. The rain intensified, droplets stinging their skin as the wind howled like a beast. The billionaire's mind raced. Should he fight? Should he run? He recalled the way life had carved him into a warrior in the boardroom, but faced with this primal danger, a new fear gripped him. Are we gonna do this the hard way? Questioned a second figure, stepping closer, brandishing a weapon that gleamed ominously under the flickering lights. A knife. It caught the light just long enough for the billionaire to register its sharpness. The woman shouted, "Run!" Her voice broke with desperation. Without thinking, she twisted away from him, putting herself between her children and the encroaching threat. That small gesture ignited something fierce inside him, a surge of protective instinct unfurled. "No!" he shouted, grabbing her arm once more. Before he knew it, he was pushing her backward, trying to shield the trio. The air crackled with foreboding tension. Could he really save her? Save them both? They were cornered, raindrops thudding like impending disaster. The edge of the alley loomed, with no clear escape. As the figures closed in, the chilling words "you'll regret this" echoed ominously in his mind. In that moment of dread, a flicker of movement caught his eye, a flash of silver in the downpour, a small piece of shattered hope glinting under the stormy sky. The question burned in his mind: was it salvation, or doom? What would he ultimately choose? Would he sacrifice everything for a woman he barely knew? The shadows surged closer, but as courage ignited within, the billionaire realized he was willing to confront whatever darkness lay ahead. And then, just as the first strike was about to land, everything froze. The thunder rolled above, roaring like an angry god, shaking reality. What would he do next? As the storm raged, time seemed to stretch, a tight rope of dread pulling them toward fate. The billionaire's grip on the woman's wrist tightened, more out of fear than strength. He could feel the pulsing adrenaline coursing through him, sending warning flares through his veins. Every instinct screamed for action. The lead figure, knife glinting wickedly, took another step forward. "Let her go, rich boy," he snarled, voice dripping with venom. The others shifted, irritation and amusement flickering across their masked faces. They wanted brutality. "Back off!" the billionaire shouted, voice shaking but resolute. He felt small and helpless, yet the urge to protect was fiercer than his fear. The alley felt like a coffin closing around them, the shadows swallowing every chance for escape. With a sudden surge of defiance, he shoved the woman behind him, positioning himself as her shield. "You wouldn't hurt her," he spat, though the truth gnawed at him. His wealth and status meant nothing here. The knife was real, and the menacing figure seemed to thrive on chaos. Another figure stepped up, brandishing a crowbar, swinging it casually as if mocking them. "You really think you can take us?" he jeered. Black-gloved hands gripped the weapon as if it were an extension of his own wickedness, ready to pounce at the slightest hint of weakness. The rain blurred his vision, but the tightness in the billionaire's chest focused his mind, sharpening the urgency of the moment. The flicker of silver he had spotted earlier now seemed like the only way out. He glanced around, seeking any glimmer of hope or a weapon to fight back. A metal trash can lay tipped over, its contents spilling into the deluge, but something was gleaming beneath it, a broken bottle. "Just stay behind me," he whispered urgently to the woman, locking eyes for a moment filled with unspoken fears. In those fleeting seconds, he saw more than just panic reflected back. There was a flicker of fire, a determination to protect her children against the surging tide of danger. "Make it quick, boys," the lead thug called back over his shoulder, impatience dripping from his words. The other two laughed, a cruel sound that cut through the storm, feeding the dread building in the air. The billionaire felt the weight of his choices crashing down. Should he run and put the woman and her children at further risk? Or should he defend them, risking it all with nothing more than a fleeting chance? The realization washed over him. It wouldn't just be a battle against the thugs. It was about confronting his own demons, proving to himself that he could be more than just a man of means. With a sudden rush, he lunged for the bottle, gripping the neck tightly. Fear chased after him, but so did the urgency of survival. Step back! He roared, swinging the makeshift weapon towards the advancing figures. The sound of shattering glass met the air, a note of desperation. But instead of inhibiting them, it incited their rage further. The thugs closed in, shadows merging into one malevolent entity. "You've made a mistake," the lead thug growled, the knife poised to strike, and in that instant, dread slammed against them like the downpour. Nothing could prepare him for what came next. The rain-slick ground beneath their feet turned treacherous as the thugs lunged forward with ferocity. He barely managed to deflect the first attack. Adrenaline surged like a tidal wave. But that single moment became a pivotal fracture in reality. As the fight began, the crowd in the distance stirred, a flash of headlights dimming in the rain-soaked night. It didn't take long for the echoes of those wrenching cries to bring curious onlookers. But would they be a light after the darkness, or just another layer of shadow looming over their fates? The courtyard before him blurred, a cacophony of sound drowned out by the heart-pounding clash of survival. Would help arrive in time to turn the tide? Or would darkness reign, engulfing all? The air vibrated with unresolved tension as they faced their fates head-on, the question looming larger than life. Who would emerge victorious from this storm? The lead thug lunged, a vicious gleam in his eye, and the billionaire's heart thundered with each thunderclap overhead. Time seemed to slow, stretching an inch into miles as the knife glinted in the weak streetlight. He swung the bottle, desperation fueling his movements. Glass crunched against the thug's arm, sending shards flying. A howl of pain shot through the air, cutting through the crashing rain. But it barely deterred the pack, it only seemed to stoke their fury. "Get him!" the lead thug yelled, spitting with rage, and the crowbar swung down toward him, a metallic arc ready to rain destruction. In that moment, panic tightened around his throat like a vice. He was just a businessman, not a fighter. But the woman behind him, the fear in her eyes ignited something primal. He couldn't back down. "Run!" he shouted at her, but she stood steadfast, hands clenched into fists. With a primal yell, the billionaire threw his own body forward, colliding with the man holding the crowbar. They tumbled, a flurry of movements punctuated by rain splashing against their violent conflict. A veer left, a punch thrown, he felt the bone-jarring impact as his fist connected with the thug's jaw. But as he focused on his immediate attacker, he felt the shift behind him. A sudden sharp gasp urged him to turn. The woman stood frozen, her eyes wide as the lead thug stalked closer, knife raised. "Let us finish this!" he thrashed, advancing, hunger for cruelty gleaming in his eyes. Fear sliced through him, and instinct kicked in. Rushing to sidestep and shield her with his body, he barely made it in time to intercept the knife aimed toward her heart. The blade scraped against the edge of his side, a terrible, agonizing sensation that spread warmth down to his waist. He gritted his teeth against the pain, forcing his body to push forward. The gang members laughed wickedly, drinking in the scene of chaos before them, their eyes glinting with malicious delight. "Look at the millionaire squirm!" one shouted, his words dripping with mockery. Suddenly, headlights pierced the storm's curtain, slicing through the darkness like a crack of hope. Car doors slammed, voices called out. A figure emerged from the muted storm, a flash of authority in the chaotic scene. The tension in the alley ruptured as the forms of uniformed figures blurred into view. "Police! Step away from her!" A thunderous voice commanded. An electric jolt of relief surged through the billionaire, while a wave of unholy fury coursed through the thugs. They darted like shadows, eyes widening in panic. The lead thug's knife fell clattering to the ground as he spat curses, falling back. "Get out!" he screamed at his crew, regret mingling with anger, as they began to retreat into the stormy depths of the alley. Yet, just as the billionaire felt the rush of breath return to his lungs, a frantic thought sliced through his relief. Where was the woman? He turned, only to see her crumpling, a look of anguish on her face. "Are you okay?" he asked, heart racing down to frantic beats. He crouched beside her, but the truth became sharp, dangerous. The moment she collapsed wasn't just fatigue, it was far worse. Fear flooded back in torrents to him. You're hurt," she gasped, pointing at the crimson blooms soaking into his shirt. His stomach twisted as he glanced down, realizing the extent of the damage for the first time. "Don't worry," he tried to reassure her, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. As the sirens grew louder, enveloping them in a blanket of urgency, chaos lingered in the corners of his mind. Would help be too late? Or had they escaped one storm only to be then engulfed by another? He took her hand, gripping it tightly, but shadows still danced around the edges of their reality. The fight wasn't over yet, not for either of them. What awaited them in the aftermath? Would they both stand in the light, or would the shadows follow? The chaos around them muffled the piercing wail of the sirens. Rain continued to drench them, blurring edges and soaking their resolve. The billionaire held her gaze, desperation roaring in his mind like a thunderclap. He felt lightheaded, like the world around him was fading as his vision tunneled. "Stay with me," he insisted, panic creeping into his voice despite his effort to sound calm. She flinched, her breath shallow as her fingers grasped for strength. "I can't, it hurts so much." Each word seemed like a laborious effort, a mounting wave of agony threatening to sweep her under. He could feel the warmth of his blood pooling against her hand, seeping more than he thought possible. The rain masked his wounds, yet he fought against the pull of darkness creeping into his mind. If he lost her too? "Help is on the way," he shouted, desperately turning around to search for any sign of the police. Their shadows leaned over the gang's retreating figures, but he couldn't feel the relief yet. It was almost as if he could still hear the laugh of the leading thug echoing in the stormy night. The sirens howled like wounded creatures, a cacophony of chaos and hope. And there he was, a billionaire with more at stake than wealth, a life, a chance at redemption, something deeper than money. "Why did you protect me?" she whispered, brows knitting together in confusion, a trace of admiration mingling with fear in her weary eyes. The question dug at him, wavering on the edge of something profound. He remembered her standing tall, courageous, as he fought to shield her. "Because you matter," he replied, raw emotion cracking through. It was simple. Life and death. Survival and loss. Just then, a flurry of movement caught his eye. Golden flashes, gloved hands, a frantic energy surged around them. Officers raced to their sides, shouting commands, assessing the scene with urgent eyes and steady hands. "Stay with us, ma'am," one of the officers called, kneeling beside her. The uniformed man cupped her face, communicating a calmness that contrasted the storm surrounding them. He reached into his pocket, fumbling for something as the cacophony of voices thickened in the night air. The billionaire felt defeated as adrenaline faded. He struggled to focus, wanting to reach out, yet a tightening in his chest weighed him down like a stone. Moving his hand slowly from hers, he aimed to help, but the world began tilting dangerously. "Sir?" A different officer crouched down, eyeing the blood soaking into his shirt. "What happened?" Suddenly, a chant of urgency spread among the police. They were reviving her. Calling for a medic. Loud heartbeats echoed in his ears. Their faces shifted in and out of focus, swirling shadows dancing to a rhythm he failed to grasp. "We need an ambulance! Now!" A voice barked, and time shattered into blinding shards of need and fear. A searing pain shot through him as the adrenaline wore off, and in that moment, the seriousness struck him hard. They were in grave danger, entwined in a web of terrible uncertainty. Panic crusaded within him as he squinted to see them working on her. Would they make it? He couldn't bear to think what life would look like without her, a feeling so profound it shook him to his core. "Stay with me," he stammered out, more a plea than a statement, half-formed thoughts clamoring in his mind. And just as a new wave of chaos emerged, another flicker of motion, darkness from the alley again. Tension tensed in the air as he recognized the figure emerging, his heart dropping into his stomach like a stone tossed into the abyss. Not finished yet, the lead thug's voice slithered through the rain, and terror twisted back into his chest. Chaos had found them again. Would they survive this final storm? Would the darkness swallow them whole before the light had a chance to rise? What would he have to do to save her, to save them both? The thug stepped forward, his silhouette heavy with menace, framed by flickering streetlights that pulsed like dying stars. The rain slashed down relentlessly, turning the street into a glistening battleground, and yet all he could focus on was her pale face, growing paler still. Fear wrapped around him, squeezing tighter, leaving only raw instinct. "Stay back!" the officer shouted, but the grown man's laughter echoed like a death knell, dulling the urgency around them. "You think the cops can save you now?" His grip tightened around something shiny, glimmering in the rain, a knife. "You should have remembered your place." Adrenaline surged through the billionaire, reigniting his fading strength. He couldn't let this man hurt her again. This was not only about their lives in that moment, it was about confronting the violence that lingered in the darkest corners of their world. "Get her out of here!" he cried, forcing himself to rise despite the throbbing pain in his chest. "You want to play hero?" the thug taunted, stepping closer, a twisted smile spreading across his face. "That's adorable." The officers responded, forming a protective ring around the duo. They were outnumbered, but they wouldn't back down. Tension sharpened the air, each heartbeat a potential countdown to chaos. "We need to move!" one shouted again, urgently gesturing to the man still pressed on the cold asphalt, his blood mingling with the rain. But the billionaire felt rooted in place, battling an invisible force. He needed to stand between her and this monster. "I won't let you hurt her," he growled, a wave of defiance surging through him, eclipsing the darkness threatening to claim their lives. In that moment, he reached for a nearby trash can, the lid barely hanging on. With a swift motion, he flung it towards the thug, the metal clanging as it hit the ground and scattered the rain. The thug stumbled back, caught off guard. It was all the chance the officers needed. Like a storm breaking loose, they surged, tackling the man to the ground with a flurry of blue. But then another voice cut through the dull roar of chaos. It was shrill, filled with panic. "Mommy!" The billionaire's heart raced. He turned slightly, his breath caught in his throat. A small child, drenched and shivering, stood just beyond the figures, wide eyes filled with terror. The innocent face tore through his chest, shattering whatever resolve he held. "Get her!" he cried, pointing towards the child. The officers exchanged glances, realizing the full situation was far worse than they imagined. Just then, chaos spiraled anew. Without warning, another figure joined the fray, a second thug from the darkness. He swung a metal bat, and the sound sliced through the vulnerability of the scene. "Ambulance!" someone yelled, but the echo felt insubstantial now. Fear gripped the scene as screams filled the air, cell doors clanging behind them. The initial ambush had left them scrambling, on high alert, battling against each escalating moment as all semblance of normalcy crumbled. "Stay close! Protect her!" the officer shouted to the billionaire. He stepped forward, putting himself in the way of danger, desperate to shield not just her, but the child now looking up at him, crying. What had unknowingly begun as a fight for survival had turned into something monumental. He felt it. The sirens wailed louder now, desperation becoming fury, but would help arrive in time? He could hold off the darkness for a moment, but it was becoming clear this fight was far from over. As the tension mounted, a deeper realization washed over him, synonymous with the storm. The fight transcended life or death. It was about a legacy, about hope in the darkest hour. Would they even live long enough to see the dawn? Would these fragile lives hold on, or would all they battled slip through their fingers like rain? "Now!" Another shout broke through. The medics were close next to each other, they looked like angels trying to pierce this hell. But the question remained looming, would they reach them in time to make a difference? As moonlight flickered momentarily above through the cascading rain, the thug growled, ready to charge again. But he felt something else, an undeniable need to rise beyond just survival into something greater, and the question hung in the air like the weight of his blood-soaked shirt. What would he sacrifice to protect them? The thug lunged forward, bat poised, eyes burning with a fury that pushed the limits of madness. In that brief moment, everything slowed. The world spun around him, chaos muted into a vague background, allowing the billionaire to focus entirely on the threat in front of him. "Move!" an officer shouted, but the warning sliced through him without any real weight. The officer's voice merged with the pounding rain, creating an echo that felt distant and unreal. Instinct kicked in. The billionaire dove forward, adrenaline surging through him as he knocked the child behind him, willing her to stay down. The bat swung, barely grazing his shoulder, a jolt of pain igniting across his body but not enough to deter him. "Stay down!" he gasped through gritted teeth, the words tumbling out like a desperate prayer. He wasn't just fighting for his own life anymore. The stakes were far too high. The child needed protection. The woman needed him. As the thug recovered from the misswing, the officers pounced again, hands gripping his arms and dragging him to the wet asphalt. Still, one other thug stood fast, smirking through the chaos, his grip on the knife steady and menacing. The big guy with the bat was distracted, but for how long? "Get the knife!" one officer called, springing into action, trying to corner the remnant of darkness. But every second felt like a lifetime, and the billionaire could almost hear the countdown ticking away in his mind. 3, 2, 1, stop. A scream erupted from the woman, and it cracked through the air like thunder. "No!" She pushed forward, desperation etched on her face, reaching for the child. In that instant, the thug with the bat swung again, directly at the officer who was attempting to restrain him. A sickening crack echoed through the downpour as the officer staggered back, clutching his ribs, determination painted on his features despite the searing pain. Then came the flash, a glimmer of metal as the knife flew out of the thug's hands, embedding itself in the gutter with a wet thud. The billionaire felt a cool rush at the disappearance of the immediate threat, but everything else was spiraling. It was all a blur of sounds, screams and shouts mingled with the relentless rain, swirling into a thunderous symphony of crisis. "Look out!" Another voice broke through as the thug, now temporarily disarmed, scrambled to his feet in a fit of rage. It was no longer just about brute strength, it was a chaotic dance of survival. "Get her to safety!" he yelled, balling his fists as he prepared to face the rising tide of violence, every instinct telling him to stand firm, to protect. Suddenly, the sirens pierced the night with urgency. Red and blue lights flashed, illuminating the darkness between them like lifelines on the battlefield. Medics rushed forward, anxious to step into the fray, but the stakes only rose. Time slipped from his grasp, and with it, a shadow of understanding crept in. Violence wasn't just on these streets, it was an uninvited guest that had slipped into their lives. In that spark of clarity, though, another revelation emerged. "Where's the other child?" he shouted, his voice cracking as his heart dropped at the realization. Panic surged anew as he scanned the scene, searching for the innocent faces amid the madness. As the thug took a menacing step back, tightening his grip on the bat, a chilling dread fell over the scene. What if the child was lost amidst this chaos? What if she wasn't safe? And just then, another scream echoed in the distance, clearer and more heart-wrenching. "Mommy!" The call reverberated through the storm, piercing the cold night air and dragging the billionaire to the brink of despair. His heart hammered against his chest, thoughts racing as he weighed his next moves. Each choice could set off a chain reaction. "Stay behind me," he urged the trembling child, clenching his jaw. He had to act to make a stand against this wave of terror threatening to sweep them all away. But as the chaos intensified, shadows crept closer, and he could feel the storm rising inside him. Would he have the strength to protect them all? He had no choice. The fight was just beginning, and even if they stepped into the mouth of danger, the time to seize the night for the vulnerable was now. Would he find them all safe, or would that desperate flash of shocking truth finally unfold within the suffocating dark? The rain fell heavier now, each droplet a relentless reminder of the urgency of the moment. Wind whipped around them, drowning out the cries of fear, muffling the sounds of havoc. The billionaire felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him, an anchor that threatened to drown his resolve. "Where are they?" he muttered to himself, scanning the shadows that danced in the flickering lights. Bodies tangled in chaos surrounded them, but his eyes remained fixated on a distant braid of darkness that loomed just beyond the paramedics and the struggling officers. The thug with the bat cursed under his breath, regaining his footing before locking eyes with the billionaire. A dangerous glint lit up the thug's expression as he wiped the rain from his face. "You think you can play hero?" he taunted, brandishing the bat as if it were an extension of himself. Let her go. The billionaire's voice rang out, steady despite the whirlpool of adrenaline driving his heart. There was no room for self-doubt. Either he confronted the monstrosity before him, or forever lived knowing he hadn't tried. Just as the thug lunged again, the howling wind transformed into a piercing scream, a voice laced with terror that shattered his focus. Mommy! The sound cut to the core, a raw echo resonating deep within him, fueling a reckless dare. He took a step forward, feeling as if each movement was an act of defiance against the individual nightmares swirling around them. Stay back! He shouted, willing the child beside him to understand. She clung tighter to his leg, eyes wide with fear. At that moment, another figure surged from the shadows, a woman, just as desperate, flickered into view. Her hair was soaked and matted against her face, a wild expression driving her onwards. Please! She cried, reaching out just as the last remnants of hope flickered in her eyes. I can't lose her. The child. The billionaire's heart raced as he realized she was not alone in this twisting tragedy. There was a child in peril, buried somewhere behind the sea of chaos. He lifted the trembling little girl behind him and charged forward. I'll help you. His voice broke. He felt the tremor of fear clawing at his throat. The thug turned, eyes narrowing as he measured the billionaire's resolve, unprepared for the intense bridge of will fueling the billionaire's movements. As he lunged again, the billionaire dodged, feeling a wave of exhilaration propel him forward. Suddenly, the streets turned thick with the sound of sirens, drawing nearer. An approaching cavalry of help, but would they arrive in time? Just hold on, the billionaire shouted. Then, in a criminal twist of fate, the thug swung wildly again, catching air before stumbling forward. In a desperate act, the woman lunged toward the thug while the billionaire's instincts screamed for her to stop. Time slowed in that instant. Mommy! The shout echoed, greater than all the chaos erupting around them. Every nerve in him ignited, every instinct screamed to intervene, but he was too far. As she collided with the thug, the bat swung hard, striking her down. A heart-wrenching gasp escaped from the trembling child beside him, echoing the death knell of hope. No! And everything spiraled into darkness. He was frozen, pain surging as he contemplated what lay ahead. Was this the sacrifice they all feared, or was there a spark yet to unfold? From where he stood, shadows loomed both in the rain and within the vast unknown of choices. Get her out of here! He yelled back to the other officers, his eyes locked on that flickering glimmer of a dangerous resolve. But as they neared tightening grips on the chaos, he couldn't shake the terror twisting inside him. The woman's voice faltered, a last breath in the storm, and the truth whispered through the silence. Would rescue come in time to unravel the threads of fate woven so tightly in that stormy night? The chill of dread clawed at the billionaire's spine. The moment froze as the thug's bat came crashing down, the woman's body crumpling like a discarded rag. Time unraveled around him, the noises of chaos fading into a muted hum, leaving only the shrill whisper of fear echoing in his mind. Mommy! The child's voice cut through, sharp enough to slice the thick veil of despair settling over him. He could feel her panic pulsating like a heartbeat, commanding him to act. But as he stood, paralyzed, the reality of the scene crashed into him harder than the rain pelting down. Get the girl! Somebody, please! He screamed, desperation mingling with the torrent. His voice broke, mingling with the thunder rumbling angrily overhead. It was an all-out war, the storm raging against the helpless cries of a child and the brutal laughter of an attacker in the rain. The thug's gaze remained locked on him, satisfied yet vexed. You wanna play superhero? Let us play. The bat swung again, a menacing arc that sang through the air, aimed not at him, but at the little girl, the woman's child behind him. It was a gamble, a calculated risk the thug took to test the billionaire's mettle. Time scattered like the droplets exploding against the pavement. The billionaire lunged instinctively, adrenaline electrifying his veins. He reached out, sweeping up the little girl, but it was the sight of the woman sprawled on the ground that ignited his fear into a raging inferno. He couldn't allow another moment to pass in this nightmare. The sirens closed in, But what if they were too late? Panic surged through him, and as he charged forward, he could hear the rising clamor of sirens blending with chaos, growing closer, yet still feeling light years away. I said let her go. The words erupted from him, fury fueling his challenge like the firestorm rapidly brewing inside his core. But the thug let out a humorless laugh as he took a step back, bat raised ominously. And what if I don't? You think you can intimidate me? There was no get-out clause left for the billionaire. He faltered, heart pounding. What if his next move led to catastrophe? Yet the girl's small hands clenched desperately at his shirt, grounding him, anchoring the turmoil swirling inside. Before he had time to overthink, he surged forward, half instinct, half raw rage, feeling alive with every heartbeat. He reached for the bat, locking eyes with the thug, a stare down shimmering with impending violence and truth. Then it happened, a moment of reckoning. An unexpected rush of pleasure twisted his stomach as he seized the bat's handle. Will surged through him, igniting a defiance he thought extinct. You chose the wrong fight. In one desperate motion, he yanked the bat, their eyes still locked. But destruction was not a finished tale. With shockwaves of tension vibrating through the atmosphere, the thug didn't go down quietly. He responded with a fierce kick, sending the billionaire colliding back into the slick pavement. The world slammed into muted chaos as pain erupted through his body. Breath caught in his throat, and as he grunted, he looked around, desperate for the little girl. She was still there, eyes wide with terror, witnessing the mania unfolding in front of her. Suddenly, through the crack of the rain, the crowd began to stir. Onlookers caught glimpses of a skirmish beneath the flickering street lamps, murmurs embedding urgency into the atmosphere. They were not just bystanders. They were a collective force murmuring for action. Just then, he glimpsed a shadow rushing toward him, a figure emerging through the blurred haze of rain. A police officer, eyes wide, rushing through the pressing chaos to what lay before him. Help! The billionaire strained, every ounce of strength devoted to the effort. His heart raced. He could not lose this. But was it too late? Even as sirens blared, darkness loomed. Had the night already woven its final thread? With the overwhelming tide of fear threatening to drown them all, the billionaire felt an unfamiliar flicker in his chest. Hope or dread it twisted together like storm clouds swirling above. Where would this lead them next? The storm was anything but finished. The rain fell harder as the struggle around them intensified. Each beat of thunder above echoed the billionaire's racing heart, but in that deafening storm of chaos, the light of hope flickered precariously on the edge. The police officer surged into the fray, eyes locked on the looming thug with a bat, determination etched into every line of his face. "Get down!" the officer shouted, as he took command. In a swift motion, he pulled out his taser, a surge of blue sparks erupting into the night. Time slowed as the thug's confidence cracked. It was a moment of perfect clarity. The billionaire felt his muscles tighten. Was this the moment they could finally tilt the scales back toward safety? "Watch out!" he yelled, throwing himself backward to shield the little girl crouching beside him. But before he could fully comprehend, a crack of electricity burst forth, sending the thug stumbling to the ground, the bat slipping from his grip as he writhed in shock. Relief flooded through the billionaire's veins like warm sunlight breaking through the clouds. "Stay with me," the officer bellowed, rushing toward the fallen thug before turning back to the billionaire and the little girl, still trembling in the heavy rain. It felt like an eternity, but help surged, light piercing through the darkness. "Are you okay?" The officer kneeled beside them. The little girl's small hand gripped the billionaire's shirt tighter as she shivered, teeth chattering. "I'm scared," she whispered, her eyes wide, glistening with tears. "Hey, you did great," he said, voice steady, fighting against the panic roaring in his mind. "You're safe now." And for a split second, he believed that too. The shadows retreating, the echoes of chaos fading as sirens wailed in a melodic promise of safety. The medics arrived in a whirlwind, moving with practiced precision. He watched, heart sinking, as they rushed the woman onto a stretcher, concern and determination mirroring in each of their expressions. Would she pull through? He felt the tug of uncertainty clawing at him again, but he pushed it back. The world was moving, life returning to what it was supposed to be, a flicker of light in that darkest alley. He turned back to the little girl, crouched beside him. "What's your name?" "Sarah," she stammered, her tiny voice small yet fierce. "Sarah, you're so brave," he said, lifting her into his arms, a protective urge igniting again. "You stay with me, all right?" As they stood, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down hard. He had fought through hell and back for this moment. The officer turned back to him, urgency burning through their exchange. There was still work to be done. "We need your statement, sir." "You acted bravely." The billionaire offered a hesitant nod. His mind raced at the thought of it all, the chaos, the struggle, the palpable danger. But it didn't matter anymore. They had fought through the storm together. They had survived. As paramedics wheeled the woman further down the alley toward the waiting ambulance, he felt a profound sense of gratitude swell up inside. As he passed Sarah to an officer for safety, he stole one last glance at the medics working on the woman, a pulse of hope igniting in the chaos. Even amidst tragedy, something anew was emerging. "Will you be okay?" Sarah's tiny voice broke through the noise. "Yeah, we're going to be okay," he assured her, putting on a brave face against the raging storm around them. "You'll see. We're all going to be all right." This time, he believed it. Moments later, the officer called them both forward. Time settled into an even rhythm now, where the ground began to dry beneath the pouring rain. The sirens faded into the distance, whispers of hope swirling with the remnants of despair. Standing there, the billionaire grasped the weight of his choices. Wouldn't he go back to the man he was before that night? The chaos had awakened something inside, a flicker of purpose that burned deeper than any success he had ever known. As the shadows of the alley receded into the past, his final thoughts turned less to survival and more to attachment, the kindled hope that springs in the darkest times, the lives that intertwined through the storms, and the strength they had forged together. In that moment, it wasn't just about fighting back. It was about understanding the immense value of every small action driven by compassion that became powerful enough to save lives. The streetlights flickered on, casting a warm glow through the fading rain. With a sense of bittersweet finality, the billionaire turned to take one last look at Sarah, her face determined with resilience. "I promise," he whispered to himself, sealing a bond formed in the storm. "I will take care of you." And with that, despite everything they endured, he could finally see a glimmer of tomorrow breaking through. Now was the time to begin anew. But before you go, don't miss our next story. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the exclusive series heading your way. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help support our channel. Let us talk about what happened in the comments below. I want to hear your theories and reactions to this intense conclusion. And don't forget to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this incredible journey. Don't wait even one more second to show your support. Your engagement means everything.